make a new one.
No, you don't.
But no, because it wasn't dolphins. It was
What?
dolphins.
Hopefully I won't break the camera.
Well,
What do you want to know?
we can start wherever you want. I guess a good place to start is your childhood, and then we can go from wherever you want to go. And you can talk about as much as you want to talk about or as little as you like.
I was born in Fort Worth. It was always me and my mom and dad and my sister Annette. Her and I used to fight like cats and dogs. I remember some of our houses in Texas, which we left there when I was 5 and moved to Missouri. But I remember we had one house that you walked in the living room, there was a pool table, and then you'd go down the hallway and there was me and Annette's room, mom and dad's room, and a bathroom. You know, 3 rooms there. And there was a big field behind us. I've heard that that's where the stadium is for the Cowboys now. But we had field mice all the time, and my mother was always afraid of mice. Oh man, she was afraid of mice.
That's funny.
And there was a chair in the middle of the hall, and I guess we were probably, I don't know, 3 or 4, something like that. And we had gone to the store and gotten some toys, you know. Annette got these sticks that you hit together to make music. I got a toy mouse.
To mess with your mom?
Well, that wasn't what we were supposed to do, but I told Annette, I said, Mom comes out the bathroom, you hit that stick together, I'll throw the mouse and watch her scream. She did. She hit them together and I threw the mouse. Mom was up on that chair, jumping up and down, screaming for Dad. We were laughing, got in so much trouble.
That's funny.
We used to do ornery stuff all the time, you know. My Aunt Barbara had an orphanage that she ran, and that's where my grandmother Teresa came from. They were all, my grandfather worked for Gene Ewing, and they called it a hope boat, and they would go to Honduras. There was a bunch of doctors and stuff, and they would take care of the people from Honduras, and they brought a bunch of kids back from the orphanage. There was Teresa, Angelica, Angel, Daniel, which he didn't even know he was black till he got up here. He just thought he was normal. There was the triplets, Enoch, and it seems like there's one other one, Hopi. They all came up and they stayed in this big, huge house, and they had a swimming pool, big pool, and they had their bunks, their rooms with all their bunk beds and stuff in them over the pool, and then they had a school room and stuff like that so that they could learn English and things before they could go to regular school.
Right on.
But
So kind of Americanizing them,
yeah,
in a sense?
Yeah, and my aunt and Uncle Lynn ran that place. I remember
Uncle Lynn, isn't he the one that looks like West County Chopper dude?
Yeah, he looks just like him, yep. But we used to run around the yard. You couldn't keep me in a shirt, you couldn't keep me in shoes till I was probably 9 or 10. But we'd run around and...
You can't keep you in shoes now.
Yeah. But we'd get them cockleburrs in our feet. Oh, them things used to hurt. You just
What are
stop.
cockleburrs? It's like
It's a little ball of stickers.
Oh, okay.
You know?
So like the little, like, what are they called now? They're basically like they're.
It's a tiny little ball, and it's got nothing but like thorns.
Okay.
And you get them in your feet, you just stop on the run, pick it out, and keep on going, you know. But we'd get in the pool and swim all day, and Yeah, we had a good time there.
Right on.
We used to go to my grandmother's every summer and spend the summer. Annette and I'd fly down there,
And where was that at?
Fort Worth, because we lived in outside of St. Louis in Pacific.
And that was Missouri, right?
Right.
No.
My dad worked for Six Flags. He moved from Fort Worth to St. Louis to when he first started doing it, he was doing all the computer work. And that's back when they had the big building full of
Servers,
computers
yeah.
with the reel-to-reels and all of that.
Yep.
And then he
Like
helped
MS
him,
DOS kind of computer, yeah.
when he helped them integrate down to the computers that didn't need somebody to stand over them all the time, he ended up going to purchasing, and that's where he finished out his career there, was in purchasing.
Right on.
So we used to go to Six Flags all the time for nothing.
For free, because he was an employee. That's
Well,
cool.
he was not just an employee, he was an employee.
He was one of the big
big
guys on
shot.
campus, kind of thing.
We'd go to the back gate and say, we're going to go see George Jenkins, and they'd be like, come on in, you know. And so, yeah, here, we used to, that was back when you could let your kids run around Six Flags and not have to worry about somebody killing them or kidnapping them or, you know.
I don't think there was any less concern. Well, there was less concern about it, but I don't think there was any less likelihood of it happening.
Well, you
know,
didn't
yeah.
hear about it, and then the security guards always watched everybody and stuff, so it was, we'd spend most of our time at Six Flags.
Nonetheless, a different time.
Yeah, so
And-
different
yeah.
time. Yeah, we used to, Grandma had when I was born, a couple years later, she bought a Bonneville convertible. It was actually a 67, so I was, 3 years old? And she bought it right off the showroom floor. And when they got it, they were bidding against this black guy, and he was pissed off that he lost, so he tried to run her off the road with it, and she just blew him away. That's the car I learned to drive in.
Yeah, I remember you saying you'd go to like the parking lot and
Well-
you'd brake check your dog into the
Yeah.
into the passenger side
She had a
glove box.
a 13-room motel, and then she lived at the end of it, and at both ends there was enough room for 3 semis to park.
That's
Yeah.
a lot of room.
Yeah. So she threw me the keys and said, take the dog and go drive the car. Okay. So I'd go to one end, turn around, come back, go to the other end, turn around, you know. But back in those days, they had the brakes that when you barely touched them, you were stopped. You know, so that poor dog, she'd be sitting on the seat. She'd be like, oh yeah, I'll go for a ride, I'll go for a ride. You know?
Regretted it.
Yeah, she'd be sitting on the seat, and I'd hit that brake right on the dash.
Oof.
I was an ornery shit, though. Yeah.
Are you not still?
Well, I was worse because, well, one year for Christmas, I asked for a toy piano and a stick of butter and a roll of Scotch tape. And I ate the butter. I took the Scotch tape and I taped all of my sister's dolls to her bed with their hair. And then I played the piano. Mom and Dad will still tell you about that. Yeah. We remember one year all you wanted was a stick of butter and a piano and some tape.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So you were a devious child.
I was an ornery child, yes. Didn't have any friends. Never really did. Just 2 or 3, you know. But I'd talk to anybody. We'd fly to Texas, and inevitably I always ended up sitting next to a school teacher. I don't know how that happened, but it always ended up happening. And me, I'd be like, hi, I'm Deb, what you doing? Where do you work? Where do you live, you know? So, but yeah, we had fun. And my sister, she was always Miss Priss, you know. I was Daddy's girl. If he was building something, by God, you better have something for me to build, you know. If he was doing whatever, working on the car, my little squirrel butt was right there with him trying to figure out what he was doing. And I was a skinny little thing back then. It wasn't until I got about 12 or 13 that I started being a pork a lot. But yeah, my dad was, he walked on water, in my opinion. He was pretty cool, you know. And Grandma and Grandpa, they was number one. They were, my Grandma Morris, fantastic lady. Fantastic lady. And you know what? I'm not the only one that thought that way, because when she had her funeral, it was the longest funeral procession they had in that town. She had probably 40 or 50 cars deep of people. The whole church was full, plus some.
It was almost
You
a couple
know.
hundred when Grandpa passed away.
You know.
Great Grandpa.
Yeah. Great Grandpa was, well, it was Reverend and Miss Morris, you know. I believe my grandmother was an ordained minister too.
And when
You
she
know.
passed away, I'll let you get into the story, but didn't you find her?
Yes. Yeah. I was 16. Yep. And she was, she ran her motel, you know. And her and I had a disagreement. And I went and spent the night at Mom and Dad's house. I don't know, that night, just something told me to call her, but I thought, no, I don't want to wake her up. Because it was about 11 o'clock at night. They think that's about what time she died. But she was stabbed, and they tied her to the bed, cut her clothes off, stabbed her, and then raped her. But she was dead before they did that, so yeah. But I went in the next morning to check on her.
Did they ever find the person?
Yeah, but he got off.
How so?
He had this little hotshot lawyer that was out to make a name for himself. Uglier than sin. Oh my God. A Mack truck hitting that boy would have been an improvement. And he was just a short little thing too. Oh, ugly. Oh my goodness. But the prosecuting attorney for the county that was doing the thing was one of the best in the state. And he got hired by St. Louis County. And he told them, he said, I will stay if you pay me what St. Louis County pays me to finish this out. And they didn't want to do it. So they put their new prosecuting attorney, which had never tried anything but traffic violations. And, well, he sucked big time and
Got blown out of the water?
got blown out of the water. This guy was like bringing in this big old fifth of whiskey. And, do you think this boy could have drank that? You know, and he'd been in jail already for several months, probably a year or better, waiting to go to trial. And so they had him cleaned up and looking like a decent human being, not what he was.
Right.
And yeah, he was drunk and high and didn't know what he was doing, and he got away with it. But then he went to Texas right after that, which kind of spooked me because I went to Texas not long after it. And he held up an Arby's and held a gun to a 13-year-old girl's head and said, give me the money or I'm going to blow her away. And then he went down the street and stood in his front doorway waiting for him to come and find him and said the same thing. But they found him guilty in 8 minutes. But I was lucky enough to get to go down and be a character witness for him. You know,
Nice. Yeah.
I couldn't use my grandmother's case as a way to say I knew him, but I knew him from school because he was in the same school that I was. And this was a kid that you could give $5 to and he'd go put sugar in somebody's tank or something stupid, you know.
He'd create chaos
Yeah.
for relatively cheap, if not for nothing.
Right. We're going to pause for a second.
Okay.
So I guess you're wanting to know about the family, aren't you?
Well, we just stepped away for a second, and we were talking about how you couldn't use your my great grandmother, but your grandmother's case against the guy in Texas as character witness.
Right.
And then you were saying something about how you went to school with him and he was kind of devious and
Yeah,
you
he
could
was
use
in
that.
the same school as I was. And he was one of those that you could pay him $5 and he'd go put sugar in somebody's tank or beat somebody up or buddy wants in.
Well,
That kind of stuff. So when I was able to go down and be a character witness for him, I was able to tell him that. So it helped get him put away. But this is my baby. Aren't you? You're my baby. Yeah. Jordan got him and he gave him to me.
she kind of stole him, but
Kind of stole him, but we'll take it.
we'll get there.
So
I guess moving past him and great grandma, what kind of followed that after she passed away? Like how did life go for you after that?
Oh, it sucked. It sucked. I tried to go back to school. I never liked the vice principal. He was a dink. And I was out for almost 2 weeks after Grandma passed because being the one that found her, and there was a lot of emotion.
I'd imagine so, yeah. If you found your grandmother brutally murdered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was out about 10 days. And when I was getting ready to go back to school, the vice principal contacted my mother and said, because I had missed so many days, that she had to send in something showing like the funeral announcement or something like that, and whatever the reason was that I was out. And so she did, she was like, whatever, so she sent it to him. Well, he gets it and he calls her. I don't appreciate you sending this stuff and going on and carrying on. And my mother was just a mess anyway. And she called my dad and was crying and carrying on, telling Dad about it. Dad called the principal and he said, I don't know anything about you. He says, but I tell you one thing, that man's going to get his ass kicked. And my dad's not a violent man in any way, shape, or form.
No, not at all.
And he said, you don't ever call and talk to my wife like that again, especially whenever you're the one that asked for the information. When he said, you made my wife cry after all she's just gone through, and he was pissed. And the principal looked at Dad and said, sir, I've been a military man for all of my life. He said, I retired as a master colonel. And he said, I am very good at giving ass kickings. And he said, trust me, this will be handled. And from then on, that guy would see me coming down the hall and he would move to the other side and go the other direction. He didn't want anything to do with me. But I quit school my senior year. I wanted to go to Tennessee for the weekend with, at the time, my boyfriend, just to spend a weekend in Tennessee because I thought it would be cool. And I would have missed one day of school. And my mother looked at me and said, I don't trust you, so no, you can't go. And I said, you know what? I'm 17. I did not live with you at all from the time I was 12 to the time I was 16. Screw you. I'm going.
Kind of rebellious teen kind of thing.
And, well, her and I never got along. She never liked me because I wasn't a boy, and she wasn't having any more kids. She had a daughter, and then she had me, and that's just how it was. And so she always preferred my sister over me. And when I left that day,
So the
She-
saying that all parents have a favorite child is true.
well, for her anyway, she didn't like kids anyway. She wanted to be a career woman, but she didn't want to work. She wanted to stay home. So I never understood but she left a note that said, "If you leave your keys, Ella." That's fine. I've never lived with them since. Last year I spent 2 months with them because Mom had that surgery, and that's the longest I've been with my parents since I was 15. No, since I was 12. Because I moved out and lived with my grandmother when she bought the motel. I lived with her so that she would have somebody with her. And, you know, I thought Grandma was the greatest thing. She used to make liver. She'd take liver and brown it and fry it and make a whole plate full and put it on the stove so we could have it for supper. She'd come back to make supper and she'd be like, "Deborah K." "Yeah, Grandma." "Was it good?" "Yeah, Grandma." Because it was gone. It was gone. But she
Not much change there with the liver.
no.
Not that you make it often anymore, but
She lived in Texas. She lived in Forest Hills, Texas. And they had a really pretty brick house and a big backyard. And they had a plum tree and I think an apple tree and a couple things like that in the backyard. And one year the plums had just ripened. And me and my Aunt Barbara picked every one of those plums and ate them. And Grandma come in, she's like, "Where are my plums?" And we just kind of looked at her, you know. She says, "You girls are going to have stomach aches." But they were good. So yeah, honoriness started long ago. I had good teachers though, because my Aunt Barbara was ornery, and my Aunt Pat, well, she's actually a cousin, but I always called her an aunt because she was so much older than me. She was good at it, and we used to love it when the 3 aunts would come for a visit, because you'd have Grandma and Omalie and Dot, all 3. Well, we would go to the store and they would start arguing over who got to pay. Her money's no good. No, her money's no good. And the poor person at the register's like, you know. And me and Sheree would be like, "I'll take hers and you take hers. You get that one." Because they would stand there fighting until they lost their money. Yeah. One year we were at Dot's house, and she had this pony. It was a big old fat pony too. I can't remember what kind, but we would have to go to the edge of the step to climb on, because we were too short to get on the horse, you know, and it was fat. So I was walking up with the horse to get off, and then Cherie was going to get on. Well, she stepped down and was at the bottom of the steps, and the horse stepped on her foot.
Ooh.
Oh, she squealed like, "Ooh, ooh, ooh."
I'd imagine, yeah, that
Little
probably didn't feel
fat
too good,
horse,
yeah.
You know?
A not fat horse.
Oh, it would've hurt, yeah.
yeah.
But Dot was, well, how do you explain Dot? She was a tomboy. She was probably the biggest tomboy out of their family. But we would go to West Texas, to Swenson, and that's where we would go and see Granddaddy.
Okay.
That was my great-grandfather. That was Grandma's dad. Grandpa Petty. And he lived in a gas station that had one room for him to live in and then the gas station. And he changed his sheets and cleaned his house real well twice a year when the girls came. They'd come in and just throw his sheets away and put new ones because they were so nasty. But he would chew tobacco. He chewed Red Man.
Okay.
And he had it in a coffee can, and he'd put it up on the shelf, and he'd be ready to get a chew, and he'd go grab his can, put his chew in, spit in the can. And when he was done, he'd go outside, rinse his mouth out, and rinse his can out, and dry it out, and put it back in there and put it back up on the shelf. Him and his buddies used to play dominoes all the time. But the whole town consisted of Grandpa Petty, my Uncle GB, his wife, and their son, who was like 2, and this old lady that had another gas station across the street.
So
And-
really small town.
That was it. They still had the one-room school. It was still there. They didn't use it, but it was still there. They had the bank, post office, and general store that was still used there. And then a couple of houses that were from back when my grandmother was a kid. And she used to tell us stories about they wanted to skip school, and the only way to do it was to get all the kids in town to skip. So there was one kid that didn't want to go, but they forced him to go, and they went up on Rattlesnake Mountain, and that's the kid that ended up getting snake bit. And they had to run back to town to get somebody to help the kid because he got snake bit.
Poor guy. Not only did he not want to go, but then he's
he
the one
gets
that
the
injured.
snake
Yeah.
bite, yeah. But yeah, so Aunt Dot and her and I used to have fights anyway, because we butted heads. We were like each other too much. One time she was going to spank me with a fan belt. I was carrying on, and Grandma's like, "What is going on? That bitch is going to hit me." Don't talk like that, you know. But she wouldn't let her whoop me. So. And then one time over at GB's house, because there was the main drag in town, and the one gas station was over here, and then Grandpa's gas station was over here. And back in the day, they had a restaurant, and then they had a little trailer out back, and they lived in the trailer. Well, the pilot light in the bathroom for the heater went out. And when my grandmother, which I never got to meet, when she opened the door to go in the bathroom, the suction got the gas from the one to hit the water heater's pilot and blew her out. And the dog hit my grandfather's rocking chair and knocked him out of the house backwards, or he wouldn't have made it either. So, but my mom was only like 10 years old when that happened.
That's wild.
Yeah. But we went over to GB's house because it was just down the street from the gas station. And he was a rum runner. So
Nice.
he had, you know, really tall fences and stuff because he was always running from the law for either carrying moonshine or guns or something. He was...
It's kind of an ongoing joke in our family that you're either a pastor or a criminal or both.
Or a criminal, yeah. That's,
Or both in some cases.
yeah. But we went over to his house, and he had these big old rabbits. I mean, big rabbits, long-eared big rabbits that just run around the backyard. And I caught me one. And oh my gosh, I was only maybe 4, 5 at the most. And I got this big old rabbit. I'm holding it up like this, and it's barely off the ground. It's a big old rabbit.
Or you were just a small little person.
Well, yeah, but... And I walked up to the back door. I was like, "Look, GB, I caught one." He said, "Bring it in here." I looked over. Grandma's looking at me. I'm like, He's like, "No, bring it in here." I said, she'll whoop my butt. He said, "It's my house." I said, "Bring it in." I said, "He said so." Took it in the house. And his son was a bigger freak than I was, I guess. He'd get up every morning, put on his blue jeans, put on his holster, and then he had a rope that was probably twice as tall as he was, and he'd stuff that in his pocket, and then he'd get up on his rocky horse and ride. I didn't say our family had smart people. Well, they do, but yeah,
Not all of them.
not all of them.
You got to have balance, right?
Yeah. And then my dad's parents lived in Andrews, Texas, and that's again out west. but they had a sandbox on the front porch. So instead of having a full porch, there was a sandbox, and then you could go in the house right by it. They always had those roly-poly bugs
Mm.
in the sandbox, and we'd play with those. Then in the front yard, they had a weeping willow tree.
Oh, I love weeping
And
willows.
we called it an Avon tree because you'd go pull on it, and Avon's coming, ding dong. You know. I guess you had to be older then, or younger, whatever. But down the road from them, they had a huge park. Huge. It was so cool. It had everything you could think of for a park, you know, because it was a retirement village in our area because everybody was old farmers and whatever, you know. And across the street from the park was Prairie Dog Town. It started out as a small area, then it went to a whole city block, and the prairie dogs they would burrow underneath the street and come up on the other lots around, and you'd see them. They'd be up there just yelling at each other, and we'd go throw them bread or whatever, and they'd be like at each other.
And fighting over the bread.
It was fun. Yeah. But
It was
they
different time for sure. Entertainment was different.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
There was
you
no
know,
cell phones or
You didn't sit
TV.
in the house. And at Grandma and Grandpa Jenkins' house, you didn't watch TV. The only time the TV was on is if Grandpa was watching the news or a preacher. That was it. But you'd wake up in the morning and you'd smell fresh homemade yeast bread cooking and bacon. Oh, there's there ain't no
And the
better
bacon
way
was
to wake
and the
up.
bacon was as natural as it gets because you guys
Yeah.
probably slaughtered the pig, right?
Well, no, they didn't do that anymore because they weren't on the farm anymore.
But I'm sure they had a buddy that had the pig that
Something,
slaughtered.
yeah.
Some along the lines
Yeah.
of 5 minutes away from
Yep.
being
Well, Dad will
slaughtered.
tell you they used to slaughter and they would hang big old hams in the barn, and put this yellow salt on it. And he said we'd go out there and just cut us a slab off when we was ready to eat it, you know, because it would cure out there with that yellow salt. But yeah, and I finally got him to open up about his childhood a little bit just this last year.
Oh, when you were down there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was telling me about how whenever they used to go to the oil drilling platforms.
I was
out
there for that, yeah.
He'd go out there and talk about how they used to pull the pipe and how they thought that was the greatest thing. And they were gophers for those guys, you know. They'd need something from town, they'd run to town for them, and they'd pay them for it. And, you know, stuff like that when they wasn't working on the farm.
Right.
You know.
Because that's a full-time job in itself,
yeah.
too, yeah.
Well, when his dad had the farm going, they had a 300-acre farm. So it was a big one, you know.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I've never worked on a farm other than for a couple days,
Yeah.
but I couldn't imagine doing that as a living,
No, I couldn't either.
especially back then, because we have modern amenities that make it a lot easier.
But
Not
Dad
to
said
imply that it's easy, but
he used to drive the tractor for hours and hours and hours and hours at a time. Back then, tractors weren't like they are now, where they got the cushy little seats and the,
all metal.
you know, the,
Yeah.
what do you call it? The radios and the
Hmm.
air conditioning and all that. It was,
Back then, it was just all metal.
you're bouncing with every bounce and,
Metal, and then the rubber tires.
shocks and-
Yeah.
Yep. So, but they used to grow all kinds of stuff. Now, Texas is known for cotton. They grow cotton. They grow sugar,
Sugarcane?
cane sugar, especially down around the border. And they grow sorghum, stuff like that. But yeah, cotton. So you would go out in the field, and cotton is hard stuff to try and, you know, but they'd have a bag that they would attach to them, and it was like 5 feet long. And so you'd pick the cotton and put it in your bag,
As you go.
and you'd fill this bag up, and once you got the bag full, then you'd take it in and they'd dump it out and you'd go and try it again, you know. But cotton has real sharp burrs on it because it starts out as a pod, and then when the pod opens up, those little burrs are there. So you'd cut the crap out of your hands trying to pick that cotton. That was hard work, and then 100-degree temperatures, and
Yeah.
we didn't realize how easy we had it. And you guys, phew, y'all ain't got a clue. No. Now, Mama, she didn't have a life like that. With hers, it was Grandpa was a minister, and I think Grandma was an ordained minister also, but either way, she was a preacher's wife, you know. So they had preachers over all the time. Oral Roberts, Billy Graham, all those guys were associated with my grandfather. And they always had somebody at the house. So Mom said she never remembers being able to sleep in her own room because there was always somebody in there, you know, that was visiting or whatever. She never had to clean the house or nothing because somebody else was always doing it.
Right.
You know.
Because back then, the respectful thing to do was to offer your services for allowing them to stay.
Well, yeah, the women to do all the cooking
Yeah.
and clean up the house, and you know, that were staying there.
The men that stayed there.
The men went and did
Yeah.
their thing, and yeah.
A different time.
Different time.
More, what is the term? Traditional
Yeah.
or whatever.
Now my Aunt Barbara was a beautician, if I could speak. And
What do you mean? So
So-
like she would like cut people's hair and all that stuff.
well, back then they didn't do a lot of cutting though. They mainly did styling and perms and you know.
Like the curliness and all that.
There
stuff.
was more to that, you know. So she always had these wigs sitting around. So at night you'd go. I used to get so scared at her house. You'd go through this one hallway that took you from the living room and the family's thing to where the office was, and then down to the kids area.
Okay.
And she always had these heads sitting there with wigs on them. You know, those styrofoam heads.
Yeah. So
Well,
you'd be walking through like what?
Here it is at
What
night,
the heck?
and it's dark, and you see these heads sitting there, you know.
Yeah.
And then you'd go to the office, and from there, it was one glass wall, and then bedrooms on this side. So you'd have to go down this spooky glass wall to get run with everything I had to get. And my little scrawny self, I was like, no, I don't think so.
It's wild.
And we all got measles at the same time. Me and Cherie, my cousin, and my sister Annette. So they had one room right off the kitchen, and they put a king-size bed in there, and they stuck all three of us in there so we wouldn't be contaminating all the other kids, you know. And, oh, that was terrible. But you could stand out on the front porch of that place and look just down a little ways, and they had the electric guy. And I think they called it Sparky, but the company had a logo that was a stick figure of lightning bolts, and that was their logo for the electric company. And I always remember you could stand there and look, and there he was looking at you 24 hours a day, because at night he lit up.
It's creepy.
Yeah.
As a kid, I could only imagine how creepy that'd be.
And if you went to the road and went down a couple of blocks, there was a big old huge cemetery. And
Okay.
that's where John Wilkes Booth is buried.
So you were like down the street from.
A huge cemetery.
Yeah.
Huge cemetery. And we would go in there and feed the ducks around the pond that was in the middle of it. And they had one duck, we called him Long John Silver because he only had one leg. And so he hobbled around. Somebody had made him like a peg so he could walk. And we used to go in there and we'd feed him and the other ducks. And they had green apple trees. And they'd pick apples and take them home, cut them up and dip them in vinegar and salt and pepper. Nastiest thing, that is gross. But they
It
thought
sounds
was
like a
great.
very interesting concoction.
They thought it was great, Personally, I thought it was nasty. Then when we lived in Pacific, I used to babysit all the time. I had to babysit for a friend of mine because if him and his brothers were left alone, they'd kill each other. So here he was, same age as me. I think we were like 12 or 13 by then. And I'd have to go
You had to
babysit
watch
for
him.
my friend,
That's funny.
But I babysit for 5 kids when I was like 9 years old. So I've been raising kids all my life. I babysit this one baby so much it called me mom. Yeah. Made money at it though. I mean, I made decent money babysitting. So,
Well, that's good. It
yeah.
got you to where you are today.
Yeah. And then when Grandma bought her motel,
Well,
trying to work in who all the family is.
well, now we got interrupted by the guy that doesn't want to do an interview. We'll just jump back in. It's recorded already, so.
So I'm trying to think of who all. Oma had 2 boys.
Who's Oma?
Oma is my grandmother's sister, Oma Lee. And she had Vernon Ray Jr., because her husband was Vernon Ray. And I'm trying to think of what her other son's name was. I can't remember. Vernon Ray was heavy into drugs. His son, Vernon Ray, was heavy into drugs, drug dealing. Both of them were. He had a, what do you call it? An upholstery shop where he did custom upholstery. And he did beautiful work. But that was his cover for his drug.
For his operation.
So, yeah. But Vernon Ray Jr., he ended up killing somebody in their group. And him and his wife fled to Canada. And when they came back, they got him coming across the border and put him in prison. And he was in prison for however long, got out, was doing really good. And then all of a sudden one of the guys showed up from the old gang and he ended up getting into it with him and killing him. And they did a standoff with him in Fort Worth. And we don't know to this day what all's happened to him. I know Texas has an express lane, but we don't know if he was eligible for that or not.
By express lane, you mean...
For killing you. For doing stupid stuff, Since he was a 2-time loser for murder, we don't know what happened to him. And then my Aunt Barbara, she passed away just here recently, but Uncle Lynn's still hanging around. He's the one that's got tattoos all over and looks like the guy from
West County
Choppers, yeah. He looks just like the old man. Talks just like him, too, because he grew up in Rhode Island. So he grew up in the area with the accent around Boston. He worked for Electric Boat, making nuclear submarines for a lot of years.
Good money.
A lot of years. Boy, he used to come home with some jokes just from going to the bathroom at work. Woo! They used to ride motorcycle, him and Barbara. And they had the nice Harley, and they had the whole leather outfits that they would wear, and the gloves and the helmets, and in the middle of Texas.
Well, once you left, because you were saying you left with your boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
So where'd you go from there?
I ended up having to come back because I had to go to court because I was the main witness for my grandmother's murder.
Okay.
So I came back for that. And then about a month later, Flint and I got married the day of my birthday
So April 10th.
on the 18th year of my 18th birthday. And we were married, and then we went to Texas and lived in Austin for a little while. Then we came back to Missouri and lived in St. Louis for a while. And we ended up married for 3 years.
When did Sheena come along in that?
I was pregnant on my first anniversary with Sheena. Yeah. And then Billy come, 3 years later. Yeah. I was pregnant, let's see. We went out New Year's Eve. I kicked him out New Year's Day. And 10 days later, I found out I was pregnant with Bill. Yeah, everybody kept saying, "Why aren't you going to go back with him?" For what? You know, he was abusive and he didn't want to work. And what's to go back for? Just because I got a kid? Please. No. So, yeah. And then when Billy was born, Gene was living at the house. That's my second husband. Because I ended up, he was just living there because he needed a place to stay, and we just hooked up and got married. Billy was born in August, and
We keep getting interruptions.
yeah,
I'm gonna take a long time editing this
this
video.
one, yeah. I forgot what we were talking about.
I did too. You were saying that Charlie's dad was.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. He was just living there as friends, you know. Then we decided to get married. But he was there when Bill was born. And it was funny because the ambulance guys, my water broke. I said, run down to Rogers and call, because we didn't have a phone. Call and get the ambulance. So he went to run down there, starts running down the street. I said, "Hey, why don't you take the car?" "Oh, yeah." It's takes it. And the ambulance gets there, and they're like, "Well, we're going to have to carry you down the steps." I said, "No, you're not. I will walk down those steps." And they're like, "Well, what if," I said, "sober people fall up and down those steps. They're real steep. They're kind of weird." I said, "No, you're not carrying me down them steps." So one of them stood at the bottom and one of them stood at the top, and I walked down the steps. I got to the second to the bottom step, and we hear something crashing. It was Gene falling down the steps. I said, "See, and you wanted me to be carried." Yeah. So we got to the hospital, and when Sheena was born, I was there 6 minutes. When Bill was born, I was there 12 minutes. But we got there, and the guy looked at me and he said, "You're going to be here for a while." I said, "You don't know me very well, do you?" About that time, he was hollering for anybody he could get to come in there so he could leave. He didn't want to be delivering no baby, Yeah. I remember when Sheena was born, our car broke down on the way. It needed a quart of oil, and when Flint come running in the house, "I got to put a quart of oil in before we go." "Okay." So he goes and puts the quart of oil in. Well, apparently not much of that quart made it into the car. I think it made it all over the motor, because by the time we got 10 miles down the road, it was like we were driving a bomb. It was smoking everywhere. So he goes in. Well, first he had a CB, and he was hollering for somebody to call an ambulance to meet us, So he goes in the gas station to call the ambulance, and this attendant is coming out with handfuls of wet paper towels. I remember looking at him and going, "So this is what boiling water is." He didn't know what else to do, so he was bringing me wet paper towels to try and make things better, you know. But yeah, I was there 6 minutes. My roommate wanted to kill me. She's like, I was here more than 6 hours. I'm sorry.
Now, my least favorite sibling,
Uh-huh.
how did she come into the picture?
Well, we were sitting in the room and trying to come up with names, because every name we had come up with, we would go over the next morning. Okay, we came up with this one. Oh, that's so-and-so's kid. Ah. So we'd have to come up with a different one. So we come up with Crystal Lynn. We're like, all right, we'll run it by him in the morning. Well, Crystal had different thoughts. She was a month early, so we're sitting there, and all of a sudden I heard pop. Oh crap! And so I ran for the room that didn't have the carpet on the floor. Splash, you know. So I changed clothes, and he ran across the street to get his mom because he didn't have a driver's license. So he gets over there, and I'm changed clothes, and I walk over there because it was just across the street. And Granny wanted to go. She's like, but I got to get my cigarettes. Is that okay? I don't care. I ain't even hurting. So we went up to Granny's place, and she got her cigarettes, which she was 80 years old, so she didn't move too fast. And we headed towards town, and you had to go through Potosi and over to Flat River and Farmington to get to the hospital. So Loretta's like, you're not hurting at all, are you? I said, no. She said, well, then I'm going to get some gas just to make sure we got enough. I said, that's fine. So she put her gas in, and we got about a third of the way to Farmington. And it's like, oh, this ain't good. And
You weren't hurting a minute ago, but you are now.
I wasn't hurting. I was holding the top of her head.
Oh.
And I'm just, not saying anything. And we got just about into Flat River. And what are you doing? Nothing. Just drive. So she almost run a cop over in Flat River, Get out of my way. But we got through Flat River, and you turn and go down, and right before you go to the hospital, you had to turn next to this little bar. And so we turned by the bar, and she was born. She was 10 minutes old before we got to the hospital. So we got to the hospital, and Loretta ran in. That was Jean's mom. She just had the baby. She just had the baby. So, they're all standing around doing nothing at 3 o'clock in the morning. So they come running out. And the one turns around to the other one. Well, did you bring the kit? Oh, no, let me go. And they were getting ready to cut the cord. I'm like, wait a minute. And I'm digging in the floorboard. I grabbed a camera. I want a picture of this. She ain't going to believe it. So we took a picture. And then Gene went in to clean up because he was a mess. And some guy's like, are you just having a baby? And he's like, no, I look like this all the time. He's mad. So, but yeah, she was admitted to the hospital as Crystal Lynn Richards because she had to be admitted as herself because she was born outside the hospital. So her birth certificate says en route to Mineral Area Hospital. And his grandmother said, what'd you name her? Crystal Lynn. Oh, that's your Aunt Joyce's kid's name. Oh.
Too late now,
Yeah,
right?
too late now. She's stuck with it. Yeah, so we used to give her crap because she was so small. She was like Rich's mom. And she was 90 pounds soaking wet on a good day. Oh, I gained a pound or two. We're like, bitch, we'll give you a few more, And so Crystal gained an ounce a month. And that was after they put her on preemie formula. So she was raised on preemie formula for 14 months. And still, we had to take her to the pediatrician once a month so that she could be weighed and measured because they didn't believe we were feeding her because she wasn't gaining weight and getting bigger, you know. And the doctor's like, well, she gained an ounce this month. She's doing good. She gained, you know, a centimeter or two, you know, something like that. But her grandmother was so little, it was just normal, just
Yeah, it
because
was
the
genetic.
rest of us weren't.
Yeah, it was
you know.
genetic. Yeah.
So, yeah, she was on so we told her she was born in front of a bar and raised on 6-packs because the Preemie formula came in 6-packs, 8-ounce bottle, 6-packs.
Explains a lot about my sister.
No, and then she ended up causing lots of problems, and her and Terrence got married, had Kelsey.
We're jumping
And-
too far ahead.
Oh,
We skipped over my brother.
which one? Charlie?
Yeah.
Well, we were living in Shakopee East Apartments down the road from here. And it was Thanksgiving Day.
How did you get to Shakopee?
Charlie's dad got a job out of the paper as a,
No, you guys were still in Missouri
mm-hmm.
at the time?
He got a job out of the paper for a farmhand in Shakopee, Minnesota. And they were supposed to give $1,000 a month plus a house and all of the utilities for working at the farm. And then you could get all the milk you wanted, and they butchered a pig and a cow once a year and split it up between the employees and, you know, whatever. And so we came up here for that. And we came up here in August, and Charlie was born in November. And by then we were not working at the farm anymore. We were living in Shakopee East Apartments.
What happened with the farm?
The guy was a jerk. He had a bad tooth and he had to go get it fixed one morning, so he called in sick, and he tried to make him make it up 3 times. You know, you called in sick one time, you know, and they only got like 2 days off a month anyway, and he wanted him to come in and work one of those 2 days 3 times. It's like, no. Yeah, we had what they called the big farm, and so there were pigs and cows that had to be taken care of every day, and there was a big barn for the cows and a big barn for the pigs. So they would go and they would milk at the main farm, and then he would come home and have to feed the cows and the pigs and take care of stuff there, and then be back at the main farm like 3 hours later to work that farm, you know, clean it and take care of everything. And there was another house just down the road from us that all they had was a few of the male cows,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
A bull?
Yeah. They had a few of them, and we had regular milk cows and stuff that were just young at ours. But they didn't have any pigs or anything, and he wanted him to go help them too. And it's like, no, nobody's coming to help us, you know. And then here I was huge pregnant, and they're like, well, she should be able to mow the yard and help take care of everything, you know. And it's like, you know what, you ain't paying me. So, but we ended up parting ways with them, so.
And what did he do after that? Is it before Charlie was born or after?
No, this was before Charlie was born.
So what did you guys do after that? Before Charlie ended up being born?
I don't think he did anything yet. We was just on like assistance. And we had Billy and Sheena was with us. And so I ended up Thanksgiving Day. When I woke up in the morning, there was water. And I was like, oh, this ain't good. So I got up and changed clothes. And that happened 2 or 3 times. But I made my turkey. We had our dinner. I put the kids down for bed. Cleaned my house. And by that time, Jean was like, you're going to get checked out. Whatever.
11/22/90, right?
Yep. So we went over to the hospital, and they came in. The doctor come in. She's like, I did that with my third one. It's not a big deal. She said, you're just breaking up ice. She said, I'll go change clothes. We'll come back and break your water down low, and then you'll have the baby. Okay, whatever. So she left to go change clothes, and before she could get back, they were yelling for her because Charlie was coming. But we had a bet going on. If he was born before midnight, he could be Charles Eugene. But if he was born after midnight, he would be Elmer Jr. And he came 10 minutes before midnight. So, but we had just took Billy out to the waiting room and had him lay down on the couch. And Sheena was already out there laying down. And here he come. No. Then when you were born, you little rat.
How did you get to that point? Because what happened between you and him before you met my father?
Well, he had a lot of issues.
Well, I know that, but for posterity's sake.
I know. He had a criminal sexual misconduct with a minor boy when we were living in Shakopee East. He did 6 months in the workhouse out in
Plymouth?
Jordan. They had one out there then.
Oh, okay.
And he came back home, and it's like, I don't believe it, but, we'll try it again. And then he had, when we moved to Chaska, the kid across the street was crazy. And he tried to say that he was trying to get him to do sex for a truck. And he was going to give him his truck. And they told us that he was so crazy that even psychiatrists wouldn't see him anymore. And that if he thought the Ayatollah Khomeini was president, you couldn't change this guy's mind. So we go to court, and then as we walked into the court, the judge or the lawyer's like, either take the alpha plea or I won't represent you. And it's like, this is the wrong time to be doing that, because now we have no options, So they did that, and I had no proof, either way. So I told him when he got out of that one, I said, okay, this is twice. Either you start being a father to these kids and holding down a job and do the things you're supposed to do, or you can get out. I don't care either way, Well, I went to work one day. Not long after that, I got to work and they said, you got a phone call. What? So I answered the phone, and it was Jean saying, you need to come home and get the kids because they're taking me to jail. And after that, he never came home. He was I don't remember how long he spent in Shakopee before they sent him off to wherever. He ended up in prison, and I don't know what all happened after that for his court stuff, but I know we had been on probation when we moved up here, and when he got done with whatever they gave him here, Then he had to take care of Missouri's, because once you're on probation, it's a violation, and so he had to go do that. And then after that, somehow or another, he ended up back up here, and I don't know. He hasn't been back. Well, now that him and Charlie talk, we've talked a little bit, but that's the first time since Charlie was about 4. So Rich has been in our life since Charlie was about 4.
So fast forward to you working together with him. How did you two meet?
Richard came to work for Soft Soap as a temporary. That's how we met. Yeah. He kept telling everybody, I want to go out with her. I want to go out with her. Finally, he asked me, and I said, I can't go out with you. I'm married. I got kids at home, and I'm married, you know. And he kept on and on. Well, he's not there. He's not there. You know. Finally, one day, I said, you know what? I'll go out with you, but we have to take the kids and go do something with the kids. Because I said, I don't get to spend a lot of time with my kids. Whatever it takes, whatever it takes. If you don't want the kids, I got 4 sisters. If you want the kids around, yeah, whatever it takes, okay? So I agreed to go out with him on Saturday. On Wednesday, I fell and broke my leg. And it was like, he says, you'll do anything to get out of a date with me, won't you? Apparently.
Well, fast forward, we're
so I was
30 years later.
I was in a brace from my ankle to my crotch to hold my leg still because I had broke my kneecap. And he started coming over with the guys, and we'd start playing cards. And the next thing you know, I couldn't get him to go home. You know, and finally it was like, just stay here, you know. You're here all the time anyway, you know. But my washing machine was being a piece of junk. You'd have to kick it, hit it, and finally it'd start working some. And all of a sudden he showed up with a washing machine. And I said, now, how do you know I wanted a new washing machine? Well, that one's about to kick the ghost. And I said, yeah, but it's fun to get to kick it once in a while, you know. And we laughed, but he was good. So. But next thing I know, he was staying at the house. All of a sudden, here comes Jordan, the first time we did anything. Sheena used to hide. She would hide in the shadows and watch us. And it's like, Sheena, you can go to bed now. You got school tomorrow. Oh, I was just getting up to get a drink. Yeah, whatever. And she would babysit us, you know. And it's like, we're not doing anything. We're just sitting here watching TV, you know. But the first time we did anything, you were on the way.
It only takes one.
That's what I keep trying to tell y'all. No. But, so, he was working at the conference center, him and Dan Bigley, and Moose. They all 3 worked at the conference center. And I went to lay down because I said, I'm tired, I'm going to go lay down. And as soon as I laid down, it's like, oh no, I know what's going on. And I got up, and we had a friend that was living with us. And I said, you got to watch the kids. I said, I'm going to go up and get checked out. He was like, why? And I said, I got this feeling, you know. So I drove myself over to the hospital, which was only 3 blocks up the street, you know. And I went in there, and they're like, oh yeah, you're a keeper, you know. And I called Rich, and I said, don't be screwing around. Get your work done and come home. Because they always had to wait till the bar closed and then clean the bar. But they would be playing toilet paper football or, you know. So he was like, whatever. So it got closer and closer to you coming. And finally I called the house and I said, have you guys heard anything from him? Oh, he's here changing clothes. I said, put him on the phone. He gets on the phone. I said, you can either get your ass over here or don't be there when I get home. I said, you know. And he walked in the room with Dan right behind him about the time that you were coming out. So it was like a party in there.
It's
Yeah.
wild to think 30 years ago,
Yeah.
almost 30 years ago.
Yeah. Then we moved into here. Let's see, you were born in April and we moved in here in October. We've been in this house ever since. But Crystal had Kelsey, and then she had Bono and Essence, and all three of them were pretty much here with us the whole time anyway. They would take Essence when they would go home or whatever, and the other two would scream and carry on so bad we just let them stay. And then Essence was about a year and a half old, and she started crying she wanted to come with. She's like, I want to go too. Well, get in the car. Can I? Yeah. You know. So we've had all three of them pretty much their whole lives.
The majority.
And they've been my children for, let's see, 10 years at least.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah, 'cause the courts gave me the parental rights about 10 years ago.
Yeah. And then Charlie's got Damien,
Charlie's
Dominic.
Damien, Dante. I've never met Dante. He lives in Texas. And then he's got Jackson and CJ.
Yeah.
CJ's Dennis the Menace.
Yeah, Charlie Jr.
Never name a kid Charlie. No matter what you do in life, never name a kid Charlie, because they're not going to be good kids. I don't know one Charlie that has not been a problem for his mama.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Charlie had a lot of ups and downs. He finally matured. He's doing pretty good now.
Yeah. And then we got William, Mr. Billy.
Yeah, Billy.
He's got 2 girls, right?
He's got 2 daughters, and he's a pastor.
What is Billy's
Yeah.
kids' names again?
We
Because
have
I don't see him very often.
Lillian and Raylyn.
Lillian and Raylan.
Raylyn is in, I want to say 1st grade this year, but it could be 2nd. No, I think it's 1st.
And then we got
And then we have Landon and Chase, which is Sheena's kids.
the almost Marine.
Yeah.
Didn't make it
That was
through
Landon.
training.
He didn't make it in the Marines, but he's going to try again going through the Air Force in 6 months. At least that's his goal.
And then what's the other one?
Chase.
Chase.
He's doing really good. He's class president, and he's working, and yeah, he's doing real good. Then we have Crystal's kids. So let me think if I can give you all of them, because there's so many. There's Kelsey, then Bono, then Essence,
Right.
then Michael, and he lives with his uncle because his grandmother and grandfather passed away. And then Ellie. They called her Nayeli, and the adopted mom changed it to Ellie. And then there's Jeremiah, and then there's Isaiah. And Isaiah he was open adopted to the foster parents. And Jeremiah was adopted by his foster mom because they wouldn't let Crystal have the kids. She was able to keep the last one, but she knew that she couldn't do it, so she just let the foster parents adopt him because they loved him anyway. So, but I couldn't do more. My health is not that good, and it hasn't been since Billy was born.
You
So,
already got three
And I'm-
three monsters in
I'm
the house
raising
now.
3
So.
now that some days I just would like to strangle them, but they're all good kids. They're.
I think we all have days where we want to strangle somebody.
Yeah.
I think that's just normal human
Well,
nature.
Kelsey has some issues with dealing with adulthood, and Essence has some issues dealing with childhood.
And
And
Vano has both.
Bono's trying. I mean, he's got a job, and now he's trying to get his driver's license. And he's trying.
We all are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then I have somebody here who had to learn the hard way that alcohol is not his friend.
I've had to learn that the hard way a couple times. I don't think we stop at one. All
Well,
right.
you're not the only one in the family who's had alcohol issues.
Love you, Mom.
I love you.